Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be listening to another episode of the Non-League Nosh. I am James, and as always, I'm joined by my colleague and good friend, Adam. How are you doing this evening, sir? We are rattling through these podcasts at an unbelievable rate at the moment.
Aren't we just? Yeah, living my life for the next podcast right now.
Pretty much, yeah.
Having a good time with it as well. So, yeah, it's good. It kind of makes a change from the daily grind of everything else that's going on. So that's what we're going for right now.
Yeah, I said this in the last one with Maka, but I am seriously starting to think about that day where I get the call to say, we need you back in work now. I've just kind of got used to this setup where, like you said, it is living for the next podcast, and that is pretty much my life at the moment.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Try having done that since sort of November time, mate.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a bit of an odd one. Like,
yeah,
I'm actually begging for the day now where I can go back to normality. Having been off for so long, it's quite an odd one. I honestly don't know how we're all going to react when we can go and sit outside in a park, something that was so small, so taken for granted. And sometimes I probably would have said, you know what, I really can't be bothered to do that today beforehand. I probably wouldn't have got too excited over a picnic. Tell me I can go on a picnic tomorrow and I'll be running down the road. Honestly.
I can just imagine you skipping down the road with your little basket.
Oh, get me the cocktail sausages, mate. I'll be all over it. Pineapple on sticks.
That's it. But as normal nowadays, Adam, we've only done, 2, maybe 3 of a podcast where it's just been me and you. We are not alone. We are joined by another guest. And if I just read the description on your Twitter bio, Justin, we've got Coaching Development Director at Conifer Official, ex-manager at Matabele Football, author of Onets, co-founder of Riga United, and journalist as well. That is a hell of an introduction. Justin, how are you doing this evening? You all right?
Evening, gents. Thanks for having me on. Good. I'm in Riga, and life's a bit easier here than it is in the UK in terms of the lockdown and stuff. So I'm good, thank you.
Well, we were just briefly talking about that before we kind of went on air, so to speak. But obviously being in Latvia at the moment, the rules that, as you were briefly kind of telling us, are so much different to what we've got going on in the UK. Just kind of, before we get into the football side of things, just kind of what is going on in Latvia at the moment? I'm sure our listeners would be fascinated to hear the difference between the UK and what you've got going on as things stand.
Well, it's interesting because I do consume a lot of the UK media, especially during this period, and they do tend to compare everything to Sweden, but they don't look at anywhere else. And it's interesting because currently Latvia's had a total of 13 deaths. And to my knowledge, only 2 of those are in hospital.
Incredible.
When I looked this morning, I think there's 50 hospitalizations and something like 4 ICUs. And I think we had 6 new cases in the whole country today. Now, it's a small country. I mean, it's 1.8 million, but even if you times it by a factor of 30, 40 to compare to the UK, I mean, it's bonkers the difference.
We have nursing homes that are clocking up those figures daily.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, what happened here was the borders were closed before the first death. So basically, there was a lockdown as such. About all the shutters went down. People couldn't get in and out of the country fundamentally. The schools were stopped immediately. I think there was about a 4-hour warning. I think it was that same day people went and picked their kids up and suddenly had them home. And they didn't introduce the strict measures that you've got in, Spain, where you can't even leave the house, kids can't go outside. Here, we've been free to go outside as much as we want and exercise. At the start, most of us stayed in for the first 2 weeks because you're not really sure the scale of what this is going to be like. Is it going to be 3% death at the dens rather than 0.1? Probably it is. So I think most people stayed in, but then you start to go out, you start to go to the parks, you go and exercise, you go on bike rides, and then you notice that the bars and restaurants are open. Not all, but the big buffet places are closed. But I mean, yeah, I was in the pub last night with a mate of mine. I've been to a cafe on a date tonight. You know, most shops are open, hairdressers are open, but the main requirement is social distancing, and there shouldn't be more of two of you at any one time, unless it's family or you live in the same place. And people are very good at the social distancing. I think the Bogs they joke here that social distancing has already been invented long before, and if anything, the 2 meter rule is a bit uncomfortable because people are more like 3 or 4 meters usually. But no, it's interesting because I think people have been treated like adults, and if you step out of line, you get fined and potentially go to prison. But on the whole, people have been sensible, and the main way is washing your hands and keeping your distance. You walk down the street and people are miles apart.
Yeah,
this is a major city. There's 600,000 people in this city.
Yeah,
but it's quite clearly working, though, isn't it?
It's clearly working, but I think the main thing was you can close the borders early before the deaths, and you can ride with it that way. Or you have to go, with herd immunity. I think what the UK's done is a mix of things, isn't it? And that's why it's such a mess.
I remember I know somebody, I'm not going to mention his name, but he went out to a stag party, literally as this was kind of developing in the UK, as we were suddenly starting to kind of get to grips with the severity of it. He went over to Poland, and within a couple of hours of him arriving in Poland, they shut off all incoming flights to the country. Yeah. And they basically told him and all of his mates, you're more than welcome to stay here, but if you don't get a flight home within the next 48 hours, you are not leaving this country. Well, so they had to cancel the whole weekend, book their flights, and they came straight back. And why we haven't done that, I don't want it to become a political podcast, whatever, but why we haven't gone and just said, right, these are the rules, this is it. There's no grey areas, and just said, that's it. Like you said, treat people like adults.
Well, I mean, in my case, I shouldn't actually be in Latvia. I do have an affinity and a history with Latvia, but I'm supposed to be in St. Petersburg. And what happened was I was visiting here on my way because I used to live in Riga. So I was visiting friends, and I was due to start a new job in St. Petersburg at the beginning of March. And things started to go a bit mad with the coronavirus, and I delayed by a few days, and then the next thing is the borders closed.
Yeah.
Now I could have gone back to the UK as an emergency flight, but then I would have been going and putting me. I thought I could put my mum at risk. My mum's early 70s, so.
Right. Yeah.
Basically could only leave to the UK in an emergency. That wasn't going to work. Couldn't go to Russia, so I've been here for almost 2 months.
I mean, just looking from what's going on here from the outside, you're very happy with the decision you made, rather than coming back to here where it's chaos. Let's not try and dress it up. It is chaos, isn't it, Adam? There's just so many people.
It's made even worse right now because all everyone's saying is, "Oh, when can we come out of the lockdown?" Well, let's talk about getting through it first.
Yeah, look at the numbers of deaths. Get a grip, people. That's all I'm thinking in my head. You can stay indoors. I know it's frustrating, but just look at the number of people that are still dying at a high rate. Just sort yourselves out.
People don't have patience, though, naturally.
No, I know, but it's just ridiculous. It's just that selfish mentality, isn't it? I don't want to get down. I'm getting too high rate. I've kept this bottled in all day.
I'm not seeing my family is a big one. Obviously, not being able to see my mum, my sister, my nieces. That's the big negative. But I'm pleased. I'd much rather be here. My life has returned to about 60% normal. I would call it at this stage. I'm out and about. I'm doing stuff, exercising, and feeling good. And looking at the UK thing, it's a mess on many levels, and I'm pleased. I'm pleased on a selfish basis. I'm not there. Yeah.
You're trapped somewhere you didn't intend to be, and you're still managing to get yourself on dates, mate. So I'd say you're winning.
100% with that one. Right, let's move away from the current main issue and let's get into the podcast. Justin, I don't know if you've listened to any of the podcasts that we've done recently. We always start these off by doing a quick fire questions, just so the audience can get to know you a little bit better. And it always sparks debate, doesn't it, Adam, among,
pretty much
with everything that we do. Everyone's got their preferences, but I want to find out a little bit more about you if we can. So let's get the questions loaded. Pub, bar, or club?
Club.
Oh,
first one.
First person to say club. Love it.
But that's clubs in my memory rather than clubs that
okay.
probably exist still, or that I would enjoy on the same level.
No, fair enough. Chinese or Indian?
Indian, 100%.
Interesting. Tea or coffee?
Coffee in the morning, tea every other hour of the day.
Nice. Favourite biscuit to dunk?
I've stopped the biscuit habit. I'd be lying.
Wow. Okay. All right. Fair.
You've probably got access as well to global biscuits, which are probably a lot better than we get over here.
Global biscuit.
Instagram or Twitter?
Twitter.
Yeah. Good shout. Favorite music genre?
Say again. Sorry.
Favorite music genre?
This I actually had a misunderstanding with this the other day. I was on a dating app speaking to somebody, and I said I was into trance, and the lady thought I said trans. Got really confusing. So just that's TRANCE.
Okay. Favorite box set?
Oh, I don't own any box sets, believe it or not. Kids are just on the road too much. So if you mean I've just watched Mother, Father, Son. I enjoyed that actually.
Another one I haven't. That's 2 in a row.
Yeah. What is that on Netflix? Is that kind of like a?
It was on. It was on BBC Two originally. Right. I think it was probably back in January.
Okay.
How I've managed to see it will remain a secret, of course, but I have seen it recently.
Adam, write it down. We're going to have to remember that one for later on.
Another one for the list.
Favourite film?
Favourite film, the original Blade Runner.
Okay.
Good film.
Adam's kind of nodding. I've never seen it, so I don't know. Can't call
original Blade Runner,
especially for the time. I mean, incredible.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Ooh, I think that's probably that must be the first person to say cats, Adam.
It's the first person in a while that hasn't told us a story of cat abuse.
Yes. Yeah.
To be completely fair, so
yeah. If you listen to other podcasts, then we've had some really funny stories about people abusing cats in their life. Sky or BT? If you are able to watch either of them, I don't know where you kind of.
Well, again, if I accidentally came across them. And it wasn't in a pub, then I wouldn't. Do you know what? I wouldn't even know which one I was watching half the time because I watch so much football abroad, and a lot of the commentators just they rotate over all the various channels, the US channels and what have you. So
right.
After a while, I couldn't even tell you which channels I'm watching. But
in Latvia, you get access to the 3 p.m. kickoffs as well, don't you?
You do, yeah. So you can go down the pub and watch plenty of
all
games.
Day, every day, innit? Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of football.
Mental. Other than football, favourite sport?
Athletics.
Interesting. Any particular reason? Why?
I enjoyed athletics when I was at school, and I enjoyed watching it. I went to the European Championships last February in Glasgow, and went to a couple of events in Birmingham as well. I was really just a lot of different disciplines, and top athletes. It's just incredible to watch them, see how talented they are. I mean, you see the sprinting on the TV, but you actually go and watch it live, you can't get your head around it, how fast they are.
Can I ask then, Justin, what your opinion is on like the Olympics being just postponed to next year? Because clearly training schedules and things like that for the Olympics massively disrupted. Massively.
Well, I suppose it depends on whereabouts in the world you are, really.
Well, this is the thing. Like, are we talking about a level playing field, and is a suspension fair?
Again, we talked about where I am. I'm in the park, and I see athletes that I've seen one or two athletes who represent Latvia out and about training.
Yeah,
obviously they're in a position. If they were competing internationally now, they'd have a big advantage over most countries, as would the Swedish athletes.
Yeah. I suppose then we look at like Spain and Italy and places like that. They've just lost their time.
They've lost the time. Yeah, I mean, I suppose athletes can live anywhere in the world. I suppose a lot of these top athletes they train in the States, don't they? A lot of them. They all these training camps and what have you. But the thing is that we're gonna have to get back to normality. This is not the apocalypse, and it can go on forever, or we can just start saying we need to get back on with things. And yeah, it won't be a level playing field for many things, but I think it's better to get on with it and start living again rather than putting things off indefinitely.
Yeah, living in fear. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Final few ones on here before we move on. Who do you support?
Northampton Town.
Nice.
Fairly local to us, boys.
I've been there. Well, I've been there once. I went to watch them in the FA Cup game against MK Dons. It was fiery. That's all I'll say. The home fans were mental. Absolutely mental. Favourite player growing up?
Well, when you over the years that changes, and you think, who did I like when I was 7? Who did I like when I was 15, etc. I suppose I'd have to go Chris Waddle, Paul Gascoigne, which is probably, we're talking more my early teenage years, but a lot of players. I suppose when I was 7 or 8, there was I like some of the Forest players of that the title winning team. But Gascoigne and Waddle were massive for me for several seasons, I'd say.
I wish I could have been of an age to appreciate Gazza. I wish I could have just been at that time just to see him play, because you don't get many characters like him anymore, or someone of that ability anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's very rare. I
wrote a piece. So I do a bit of writing from time to time. I'd written a piece on goal celebrations, and which led me to the Gazza dentist chair at Euro 96. I was at that game behind the goal.
Were you?
Yeah.
I sent you a suggestion for that.
I got hit by someone who thought I was a Scotland fan because I had a blue top on.
What?
Yeah. But he was. I remember I took my mum to a couple of England games, and she said it was like there were 4 Gazzas on the pitch.
Right.
It's just wonderful to watch. And Chris Waddle was one of those players like Matt Letizia. I'd travel to other stadiums just to go and watch them play.
Wow.
Playing for. I watched Chris Waddle playing for Sheffield Wednesday, and I got no affinity to Sheffield Wednesday, but just incredible.
Amazing stuff. So this might be very similar to what you've just said, but the best player you've seen live?
Yeah, I'd say Gascoigne.
Yeah.
On his day, but some amazing. Lothar Matthäus, I think, was when you look at a player at everything to his game. I think he was. He doesn't stand out as the flair player, but he had everything as well. I think seeing him at the peak of his powers. But there were lads like Baggio as well that I saw.
Oh wow,
what a name! What a name. Adam, I like those.
I've got one extra question to add in since we've got a bit of a globe-trotting guest this week.
Go on then.
Now, I love my food, Justin. Big fan of food. What is your favourite speciality dish that you've had from your travels around the world?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm vegetarian, so that sort of...
that takes a lot of it out.
Takes a lot of it out. Best speciality dish. I think I'm going to let you down with this. Nothing comes
fish and chips at Yarmouth Beach. There you go. Job done.
Done me on the easiest question of all. I'd say, actually, I remember having some street food in Burma, of all places, and it just being incredible. And I couldn't, such a poor country.
Yeah.
And it just time after time after time, I was having this street food, veggie stuff, and it was all curries and whatnot. That was gorgeous.
There we go.
I'm being very general there, but
mental, absolutely mental. I love some of those answers, especially the players that you've said. Like that, some of those names are just wow. Yeah, absolutely incredible. Adam, over to you, sir.
Yeah, so today's general topic on the podcast is to have a bit of a closer look at Colchester United's statement, which has come out today. Unfortunately, they have let 4 players go, and
it was only a matter of time before this kind of stuff happened. Really,
well, before it happened to someone. But I mean, the statement, obviously, that went out along with it tried to explain why they've had to let these players go and not sign them up to contracts, but it felt like it was something that they'd found very difficult to write. There were statements in there saying that under normal circumstances they would have done everything they could to re-sign these players, and they've come off a campaign where Colchester United were actually pushing for promotion back up to League One again, or Division 1, or whatever you want to call it.
So are they saying then that, because obviously I'm guessing that contracts run till the end of June?
Yeah.
So they must be saying then that they don't feel as if there's any situation in which their season is going to be finished. That's kind of what I'm indicating, because otherwise,
exactly,
you wouldn't make this kind of statement, would you? There'd be no reason to.
I mean, it's a bit of an odd one because you'd think their contracts would run till the end of June as well. So I don't know what kind of agreement has been in place. However, one of the 4 players, I think it was Frank Newell, actually put on Twitter today that he did know about the decision 2 weeks ago and they had to keep it under their hats. So something must have been said somewhere, because not only Frank Newell's gone, but Ryan Jackson, Luke Prosser, and Brandon Comley, and I believe all 4 of them are pretty much starters. Yeah. They're 4 fairly big players for that club, but they've all gone saying the right things. It all seems very positive, and the chairman says, if the circumstances improve, absolutely no problem in having them back. But I fear this is the start of a bigger problem.
Yeah,
this is the start of seeing that visually clubs are struggling, and they've got to cut their cloth accordingly, which is something that we maybe touched on in the early days of this entire issue as to what the virus would do to football on a wider stage. Now I think we're starting to see how it's starting to filter up, not just from the league tables, but now into the actual everyday runnings of the club. Quite a lot of people were surprised to read it, but I think the surprise is more along the lines of, well, that's the first club that's sort of said, and no surprise, the first club to publicly come out and make a professional statement is at the lowest tier either. Like, let's not brush that aside. Where money, like Colchester, don't have the biggest following ever since they moved from Layer Road to where their new ground is, which is very much on the outskirts of town.
They're a self-sustaining club, though, aren't they? The whole thing about Colchester is they have their youth setup, which is so prolific at bringing players through.
Yep.
They have to rely on youth players in order to fund the whole club.
Yeah, the rest of it, and that's where a lot of this statement comes from. Chairman has admitted that a lot of the running of the club is funded by his other businesses. So really? It's very clear that it's not the club that's making the money to turn it over. It's the running of the other businesses, and that allows them to inject some cash into it. And it's obvious that with those things falling by the wayside. I'd like to put it in a different way, but I don't know the details of the other businesses that he owns.
Yeah.
But if we say that he's not making money on other businesses at the moment and he can't therefore afford to inject cash, then what do you do? And he does actually mention, James, like using the youth prospects.
Yeah.
Going forward, like relying on those to bring up the goods. And
yeah. I mean, from your perspective, Justin, then listening to, you're watching everything going on in the UK from the outside at the moment. What are you taking away from everything that is going on? You must be looking at what's going on in Latvia, looking at what's going on in the UK, and just thinking, how has this been allowed to happen? Like the number of football league clubs, and we've already talked about it. Non-league clubs have had to pull out of divisions, have had to cancel teams and players, and this is the first example of players being let go. Where do you, what do you make of all of that?
Well, it's the scales of money, isn't it, in the UK? I mean, the Latvian football season looks like it'll be up and running on the 1st of June, believe it or not.
Right.
And the lower leagues are about 10 days later. Although there's no fears of overcrowding at the stadiums here, so it's not when you got 150 watching, it's not quite 30,000. But the same applies here in many ways, because you've got clubs and just the scale of the money it's involved means that clubs here weren't going to go to the wall, because in the UK, it's ridiculous sums of money even when you go down to the lower divisions. The salaries are still huge, relatively speaking. And, Northampton Town went on the FA Cup run this year, and I think close to $1 million we earned from TV rights and what have you. And then, they start saying, well, it's a couple of months of 2 or 3 months of salaries. But you're talking about a club in the 4th tier. So it's like the UK fundamentally. A lot of people live, there's people that are on 50, 60 grand, but they can't go more than 2 months without a pay salary. Because people are leveraged up to the hilt for everything. Yeah. And this sort of applies to football clubs to some extent. So it's a difficult one. You get something like this happens, and you start to see the dominoes start to fall, and ultimately the players are going to have to take massive pay cuts, I think, because I don't see even that's in the short term, because otherwise the alternative is just to bring all the youth lads in. And we've seen that in the past. We've seen it in different ways. We've seen it in Chelsea in the kind of way they've had it. But I remember with Northampton back in the day when the club was in financial trouble, and we sacked all the players, and the youth lads come in, and they were rubbish to start with, and then after a few weeks they started to compete. And I think that's how it will start to go. I think clubs have got to carry on existing. So unless the players are willing to have massive pay cuts, I think they're going to start bringing the young lads in.
It just sets a hot. It's just like you said, Adam. It's just the start, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
100%.
We've been waiting for this for weeks, for someone, like of a big scale. Because most people outside the non-league scene, they couldn't give a toss if some team at step 6 is dropping out of non-league football. But when you start seeing it happen to a club that has got a 10,000 seater stadium, people suddenly start going, well, hang on, that's not right.
It's like Ipswich. I think they declared that they're losing £100,000 a month in sponsorship revenue at the moment.
Right.
Like, I'll be honest, they're not exactly the wealthiest club in the league. Like, that they don't have money. The money that's going into that club is to be putting in to keep them afloat. They're not going to be big spenders or anything at any point whatsoever. They've got a heck of a debt behind them as it is. I don't know how long some of the much poorer teams could stomach that for. And I can't see sponsors wanting to get back involved with football again anytime soon. You can have so many companies that are just about going to survive through this. I can't see any of them just suddenly saying, "Yeah, I'll pay you £5,000 to chuck a sponsorship board on the side."
Yeah, it is. I suppose at the moment kind of secondary, really, isn't it? Secondary. Well, I suppose I don't know. It's difficult because a lot of clubs, that is what they rely on, don't they? They rely on that sponsorship money to be able to get them from one point of the season to another.
Yeah,
it's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you are right. Is how many of those companies are going to have any money left to chuck around, let alone, be actually willing to or want to continue to get into football? Because I think football's reputation is getting dragged through the mud a bit at the moment.
I'd agree.
Especially from an English perspective, the English football is getting completely dragged through the mud. It's been shown up with the fact that the Premier League and the EFL are so keen to get things started, and I keep hearing this June date in mind, where that is what they wanted to do. They wanted to start on June, and there's no way in the UK you can do it, because unless you get all of these players together and put them in isolation together, away from their families, and then test everyone to confirm that, yes, there's no threat to them going on the football pitch, and then they can go and play against the other team, you're still going to have contact within that game, and yet we can't test our own staff, our own NHS staff, who are really struggling to get the equipment, the tests done on them. You can't justify football carrying on, and yet the people who are on the front line are going to struggle.
It would be an absolute farce if that happened.
It looks like it is going to happen, though, because they're pushing it so much at the moment. They really, really are.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about money. They don't want to lose out on money. They don't want to deal with the legal aspect of TV rights, the sponsorship, the contracts, the players who contracts are expiring, etc. They don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, where do you kind of sit on it, Justin? What do you kind of think about it?
I'd say that there's a slight view. It sounds unpopular on the surface of it, but sometimes is the medicine doing more harm than what the actual virus is doing? The scale of what this is doing to the UK, it can't go on. It can't go on indefinitely. And if the figures are correct, that the death rate is 0.1%. Rather than the 3% we thought of at the start, there comes a point where life's got to return to normal, because otherwise thousands of people are going to die from missed cancer cases, from extra suicides, etc., through society essentially falling apart. There'll come a point where, because the death rate is obviously is starting to drop as well. I think we know it's peaked. And I'm not belittling, and when I say you kind of got to be careful what you say, because you're not belittling anybody. I'm worried about my mum, and we're all worried about people. But there is a point coming that they've got to find a way of getting life continuing again, and if that means playing behind closed doors as a first step. Maybe that's the way, and you get TV rights for some of those lower division clubs, maybe playing live, and get like the Belarusian football suddenly got a bit of attention, or maybe you say nobody over the age of 55 can attend a game, and you got to sit 10 seats apart, and there's 1,000 tickets in a long non-league ground about it. I just think. We got to start looking towards an exit. This can't go on like this. Otherwise, the damage is going to be much more severe than the actual, what's taking place at the moment.
Yeah. You raise a really important point about other people's missed appointments and stuff. Like, my partner works in hospital, and through fear of things, just people have cancelled appointments.
Yeah, the missing cancer cases. People are missing, life-saving surgery potentially. Suicide rate is going up. Domestic abuse, alcoholism.
Yeah,
smoking more and therefore dying. Several years later from that. I mean, everything has a cost. People go out and drive cars. People smoke. This is just immediate, isn't it? Fairly immediate. So it's shocking because you see so many people dying so quickly. And I'm not insensitive to any of that, but you've also got 20,000. It's in a 60 million population, and the scale of it sounds more dramatic than it perhaps is, because, as we know, thousands of people die every year from influenza, and the scale of death from cancers and all these other things are shocking as well.
It's difficult because there's been people say to us, like, football can't carry on until you've got a vaccine or something like that. But at that rate, it could be another year, could be more. I'm not saying football can't continue. That's not the only thing, but everyone's lives can't be on hold for that long. Not just for economic reasons, but mental health massively.
Well, society will break. The UK, I just think it will fall to pieces. You'll start. I mean, there's been no social unrest yet, but that will come down. That won't be far off.
Yeah,
young lads who, on the whole, have got very little chance of themselves of dying of it. Not being able to go out, not being able to go and meet people, not being able to party, not being able to do anything, and there'll come a point where people will start smashing things up, and
yeah. Well, I mean, the country is already at a breaking point already, isn't it? I mean, they've started to see people over this weekend who are just like fed up and are going out and doing stuff, even though they've blatantly been told not to. Do you know what I mean? It's already starting to happen. It's interesting because we look at, again, I don't want us to get too political, but we look at the US as, stereotypical morons, idiots over there. They're always, that is their kind of mentality of what English people do tend to think of them. But we are so close to doing what they are doing at the moment.
Yeah.
And yet the rest of Europe, I mean, Spain and Italy aside, have generally coped with this quite well because they've had measures in place. They've done things at the right time. They sorted things out very quickly, and they've kind of put a stamp on it. Whereas we have been so far behind. We've been lagging so much that this is now going to drag on for ages because we didn't handle things properly to begin with.
It's like you look back and like Cheltenham Festival happened.
Yeah.
What a joke. What a joke.
Mental. But, we didn't act properly. And now, as a result, football, and particularly what we're interested in, Adam, non-league, is going to suffer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not the most important thing in the world, but to a lot of people, football is what they live for, what gets them to the end of the week.
It's the community. It's more than just the game.
So it's going to have a massive knock-on effect, isn't it? This is going to, from a UK's perspective, we've kind of dug ourselves a hole here, and it's going to take so long for us to get back out of it because we've messed up at every opportunity that we could. But,
I think in coming podcasts we'll have more discussions like this as we hear of more teams. And the one that worries me is that when you'll get non-league teams in the sort of core part of the pyramid, sort of maybe steps 1 to 7 that stay, I can't do it.
Yeah, and it will happen.
Can't carry on.
It will happen, but this is just the first one. I mentioned it last time. I'm worried about Plymouth. That's a club I'm really worried about because of how much they've done on their new, on that new stand. They've pumped a lot of money into it.
We've watched videos, haven't we, before, and we've got together before recording on YouTube where fans are going around grounds where everything's just gone by the wayside, and most of the time these clubs are the ones that are building new stands, and then something happens halfway through, and
One reason I believe why in Latvia the policy is as it is because the last the economic crash of 2008 absolutely devastated this country.
Right.
And the consequences on society here. People moved abroad in their masses just to pay off their loans that they've taken out on property here and what have you. And I think the government recognised that if it was to shut down the whole economy here, having experienced what had been experienced here before, the consequences were greater potentially. Now they're fortunate they've moved swiftly, and the 13 deaths is phenomenal. But when you were talking about the stadiums, just remember there's a building down the road here. They started building it in 2007, 2008, never got finished. It sits there still, you know.
Mm.
And that's from that time, and that's going to happen now. There's going to be projects like that. There's going to be clubs that will go to the wall, and those things will sit there.
Yeah,
That's it. That is it. But yeah, it's an interesting one. For everyone listening at home, what do you make of the statement that Colchester made? Do you kind of see that this is going to happen? Let us know down in the comment section. It'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts. As Adam and myself and Justin have said, it's not going to stop, I'm afraid. It's just the first of many clubs that will make that announcement that players are now. It's the first and biggest cost-cutting exercise for a lot of those clubs, isn't it? It's their biggest expenditure, and it's an easy one to say, right, well, sorry, but you're gone. So it's an interesting one, but I hope you can let us know your thoughts, as I said, down in the comment section.